Welcome to Happy Hour, Whiskey Business Edition. This fall we are discussing and enjoying and suggesting, in my case, delicious whiskeys to try at home. We have spent the past few episodes, this is episode 4, 1 being that we talked about whiskey in general, and 2, I just kind of talked about some bourbons that I liked. 3, I talked about some old school bourbons that are worthy of reconsideration or retrying, in my opinion. I guess the whole show is my opinion, it's my show. And this time we're going to talk about rye whiskey and why we like rye whiskey. And by we, I mean me, because I'm a Gemini, and so am I. Mental health. Anyway, rye whiskey. As discussed earlier, the type of whiskey is determined by the grain that is used in the largest portion. The lion's share percentage grain is what kind of whiskey that is, right? So any whiskey that is 51% corn is a corn whiskey. Any whiskey that's 51% barley, that would be a grain whiskey as well. Anything 51% or more rye is a rye whiskey. What's the difference between rye and bourbon? In process, really nothing. But it has more to do with the mash bill than it does the end result of the process through which it is aged in barrels or anything. The process is effectively the same. It really kind of comes down to, at the end of the day, it's the grain used. So kind of like on the tip of the OG products, Bullet, when that came out, that was like a big one. Bullet Rye, very popular. I prefer it to Bullet personally because it's drier. Like if I had to drink wines, I'm not like a Riesling person, but maybe something that's just like a little more dry, a little more crisp, right? That would be the case for Bullet Rye over Bullet Bourbon. That's like the most layperson's way I can think of to say it. But that's just why I like it more. It has lots of still complexities and notes, and there's caramel in there, but just not as much. It's a little more muted and in favor of more of a sharp dryness. Ryeittenhouse is a popular rye. You see a lot of people just sipping on this. It's good in cocktails because it's 100 proof. So I mean, this is. I want to talk about spicy. This one will do you straight. And like will hold up in your whiskey-based cocktails. Would make it like a nice, like a rye Manhattan. Yeah, or Sazerac cocktail, good in Sazerac. But the one I want to focus on is Dickel Rye. I feel like it's an oft overlooked rye whiskey, and one of the reasons I think I like it so much is, like I said, you only need to have 51% rye in the mash bill to qualify as a rye whiskey. These crazy mofos are rocking 95% rye to a 5% malted barley ratio. As a result, you end up with an incredibly spicy, very, very crisp. It's 90 proof, so it's not particularly excessive. So that's not where the spice is predominantly coming from the rye. And if you are making, like, the Ryeittenhouse, no shade, have used it, 5 stars, we'll be back. But my go-to grab in rye is always the George Dickel. And one of the reasons I like it too is, let's grab a glass. It's enjoyable on its own as well as in cocktails. As I mentioned in an earlier episode, I do enjoy cocktails. I enjoy making them as much as I enjoy drinking them. But I view a nice glass of whiskey, like as I said, as its own kind of cocktail. Because there are so many, no shade to vodka. It's basically the chicken of alcohols. It's just kind of like, it kind of goes wherever. I feel like vodka is more used to make other flavors alcoholic. Not that you can't have nice vodka. Of course, there are lovely vodkas out there, but like whiskey is just kind of its own thing. I would say gin also is something to be savored and enjoyed on its own. but also does well in the cocktail. Whiskey does great in a mixed drink, but if you've got like a nice whiskey, to me it's almost a shame to mix it. It's almost a shame to put it in something, to dilute it. Like a nice tequila, you can totally sit with the pepperiness of that. But like once you put it in a margarita, are margaritas delicious? Absolutely. Am I discouraging you from having them? No, I'm not a jerk. But if you have a nice spirit, it's worthy of consideration just on its own, like maybe just on some ice. I will say this is true for the Dickel Rye as well. And I don't know why, I just kind of view it on the shelf as like this little underdog. You don't necessarily hear people talking about it all the time. It's not like super popular in conversation. Maybe they don't have the biggest advertising budget or whatever, but it's just always, I go back to it and it's like, yeah, it just holds up. I'm gonna take a sip and we're gonna talk about that. Spicy, zagadoo, peppery. Is that gross, that noise? Gross. Yes, sweet, sure, not overwhelmingly so. Dry. I don't know. My words are failing me, but it's, you know what I mean? It's spicy, dry, not too sweet. It's something you want to take a little sip of. I'm picturing me in my house. The wife and I got a record on. We're doing some cooking, you know. She's put me on some vegetable chopping detail. I've got like a little shelf that my speaker's on, hooked to my record player, which is in the kitchen. And I take a little sip of this, you know, take it down, put it back up, and just sit there and just contemplate it for a minute. Like again, peppery, spicy, dry, but not altogether dry, because obviously there's some sweetness there. As you can see, lighter in color. And if you did want to make a cocktail with it, like a Sazerac, like an old fashioned, it really holds up in an old fashioned, it's great because it's itself not overly sweet. So when you're mixing it with other more sweet ingredients, it doesn't just turn it into a sugar bomb, which I appreciate personally. Maybe you do too. Dickel Rye Whiskey. Try a bottle if you haven't. I mean, try a bottle one glass at a time. This has been Happy Hour, brought to you by Maine Spirits. You can learn more about Dickel Rye Whiskey and many other whiskeys at mainspirits.com. You can download their app for your smartphone, which is a smart move. What to buy, where to buy it, and what to do with it once you get it. You can follow them on Instagram at Maine_spirits. And as always, we implore you to drink deliciously and responsibly.